The Wildcat Sports Club CNY Brewfest is coming up January 31st and February 1st at the New York State Fairgrounds. Taste your way through unlimited samples from more than 100 breweries. Now featuring hard ciders, seltzers, craft cocktails, and mocktails too. Grab your tickets now at cnybrewfest.com.
All right. Welcome in on the postgame show. Another tough one for the Orange. The winning streak is no more. And it really ended with a thud. It was fun while it lasted. 2-game winning streak. Can't even really call it a winning streak. But in a year like this year, it felt like a winning streak for the Orange. And Louisville came in and looked like a far superior basketball team and program from start to finish here tonight. So welcome in on the Burdick postgame show. The game has gone final. Some of you maybe didn't even watch much of the second half. This is one of those post games where we probably could have just started it, 15, 20 minutes ago. But the pain is over for the Orange fans, at least for tonight. It was an 85-61 loss to Louisville. The Cardinals have won 7 in a row. That is a true winning streak, and they are pretty good. But it still does not remove the sting of another just tough one to watch here for the Cuse and what has been a year of a lot of tough games. They are now 8-9 on the season. So we will hash this one out on the Burdick postgame show. We'll hear from Red Autry shortly and go live to the podium as soon as he is at the podium and give you his full postgame press conference. As we always do, you can get on in the QSportsTalk.com chat as well. We'll be answering your questions in the chat throughout the next hour or so here on the postgame program. And, of course, you can call in, too. I'm sure some of you will have plenty of thoughts and be eager to call in after this one. Maybe someone out there is like, you know what? I want to call in. I haven't done it yet, but tonight's going to be the night. This is going to be the true first call for me. I've finally pushed over the edge. Maybe we'll get some new callers even tonight. 315-437-7644 is the phone number to call. Tim Leonard in with you on the Burdick postgame show. Again, 315-437-7644. That is the phone number to call, and we will get to Red Autry's full postgame press conference as soon as he hits the podium. Final stats from this game. J.J. Starling, really a dud for him after he was on a tear in the last couple games. It was a huge part of the Orange success. He was never really a factor. Louisville showed a lot of defensive attention towards JJ tonight. Chucky Hepburn was the best guard on the floor. He is probably one of the best defenders JJ will go against in a game this season, and one of the best overall guards really in the ACC. Hepburn was the guy who hit 6 threes for Louisville, had a game-high 24 points in this one. Starling 4 points on 1 for 7 shooting. He had 6 turnovers and did have 4 assists, played 32 of the 40 minutes, but 1 for 7, 0 for 3 from the outside. The Orange started the game 5 for 10 from 3, and then they went 3 for 15 from that point on. It was kind of a 3-point shootout in the first half. Louisville has not been known for shooting the 3 at a high percentage this season. A lot of the chatter in terms of the scouting report on the Cardinals was they shoot a lot of threes, they don't make a lot of threes, and every time I heard that mentioned on our airwaves and elsewhere this week, I was just thinking to myself, this feels like the game that Louisville is going to break out and make a lot of threes, because that's kind of how they've gone when Syracuse has gone against a team that hasn't been making a ton of threes on the season. You look at Louisville just player to player and their individual pieces, and it makes sense that they would be a good three-point shooting team. And they were tonight, 12 for 28, even though they haven't been all season long. They're shooting about 30% on the year as a team from three-point range. They shot at 43% from beyond the arc here tonight. So they were 12 for 28. The Orange were 8 for 25 in the end from downtown. Elijah Moore, 5 minutes in the end. 6 minutes. He got in there for a minute in garbage time at the end, but played 5 minutes in the first half. He went 0 for 2. I tweeted this out. I think Elijah Moore is going to set the record for most three-pointers going in and out and halfway down and spit back out in 1 year. It's not like he's missing these threes by a lot. It looks good off his hands. We know he's a capable shooter. We know it's in there. We've seen it at times this year. A little puzzling to me why Moore didn't just go out there for the final 10 minutes of the game when this one was out of reach. Just, the same policy that we've had with Chris Bell, just urge him to keep shooting. That's what the coaching staff has been doing. Red has talked about how a lot of his shots are going in and out, and they know that they're going to start to fall. I thought it would have been a good use of time here to maybe just let him make a couple shots because, honestly, you just need more shooting, whether it's from him, whether it's more consistency from Chris Bell, who was the leading scorer in this game. He did have 18 points. So we're off and running on the Burdick postgame show. I'm going to take an early timeout, as we always do, because I want to get to Red Autry's full postgame press conference when it happens live. So come back with us. We'll have Red's full presser, and we'll get your phone calls as well at 315-437-7644. Again, that's 4ESPN44 if you'd like to call in. Final score from the Dome, 85-61. The Cardinals are 13-5 on the year. The Orange dropped to 8-9. And we're back after this on ESPN Radio and CuseSportsTalk.com. How we doing? How we doing, chat? Yeah, I do have to deal with Pat, although he hasn't called in yet. Kind of surprising. I thought he would be called in and ready to go by the time I hit the air. Devo is on the TV tonight, Zach, but he was doing radio for BC on Saturday. Always cool to hear Devo. Oh, sorry. I think I'm scrolling too far up. Maybe these were comments from Brian's show. My chat hadn't re-scrolled. You guys were talking about me having to deal with Pat and Brian's show, I guess. Red Autry is a less expensive coach. What are we talking about? Him compared to Pat Kelsey? Yeah, Kelsey's a good coach. I would say Louisville also has more money to play with in the portal than Syracuse does. That's pretty obvious. LA Golf Club whooping Jupiter Golf Links. Yeah, I haven't been able to watch, Ryan. I recorded that. I was looking forward to it afterwards, and it sounds like we got another blowout in the TGL. A small market team just not able to keep up with LA is what I've been seeing. Syracuse looked like a small market team compared to Louisville tonight. College sports, it's kind of turning into the MLB a little bit, where you get the programs, the schools that have the money, and you don't. CBW says blame NIL. Well, look, there's other reasons. I think Red is not happy with how he's coached this team, and I think they're not getting the most out of the roster they have. But if you don't recognize that the number one reason here is NIL and Syracuse not having the personnel because they don't have the NIL funds compared to other schools, I don't know what to tell you, really. Golf, I think, is on ESPN, Govendo. So flip that on while we're doing postgame. Don't leave us. I don't know I don't think it's effort, really. But, I mean, was the effort a little down in the second half tonight? Sure. But weren't we praising the effort just a couple games ago? Like, maybe not you specifically, APH 2014. Don't know if that's how I say your chat name, but that's what I'm going with. Roy Williams and Bill Self are not coming to Syracuse. The idea, like, let's think about what we're talking about. NIL. If NIL is the issue, you need to bring in a rainmaker who can sell a vision. Yeah, I mean, look at what Fran is. Like, you almost need a guy who can sell a vision more than an X's and O's coach. Maybe you can make a case. Like, I could hear going a little off the wall with someone who's more of a brand name, and maybe that is more of the strategy. Georgetown literally didn't go into NIL. Like, they made a point to try to not use it, and they suffered, and now they are going into it, and they're getting good. St. John's, I'm not aware of their NIL. I think you're making a joke about, like, they don't have as much money, but if we're being honest, it's not like Georgetown and St. John's are tearing it up either. It's the SEC schools that have gotten a whole lot better since the NIL era has come into place. Yeah, I don't, Coach D, I don't think they maximize the NIL they have, but, you know, Louisville, from what I've heard, Frank Anselm is getting paid like probably one of the most expensive guys on the Syracuse roster, if I were to guess, from the numbers I've heard for Anselm. Anselm eBay now, I should say. So, you know, if you have more money to use, it's easier.
At 100.1. This is the Burdick Lexus and Burdick BMW postgame show.
Yes, it is. Welcome back on the postgame show. 315-437-7644. That is the phone number to call. If you are angry, if you're frustrated, if you're sad, if you're disappointed, if you're anything after this Syracuse loss tonight, we can hash it out together. Tim Leonard back inside our studios. We will go back out to the Dome, and more specifically to the press conference area, and more specifically to the podium, to hear from Adrian Autry, get his full press conference. As soon as he hits the stage, the podium area, we will have that for you live. You can always watch it on CuseSportsTalk.com. And you can watch the shows, the post-game shows, on YouTube now as well. You can chat away on YouTube and chat away on CuseSportsTalk.com, as we are off and running for another post-game show here brought to you by Burdick. And it's another unfortunate post-game show from a Syracuse standpoint. Didn't have high hopes going into this game that the Orange were going to win. I think we talked on the BC post-game show. It was me and Jordan who did that one. And we sort of hashed out, okay, positive to see them win and take care of business with a 2-0 week, and good to get their first true road win, yada, yada. But is it sustainable? Is it going to be something that is going to translate once they play some good teams? And unfortunately, Louisville has already played a lot of the good teams in the ACC, and they are now 6-1 in the league. Their schedule was front-loaded. The Orange's schedule was honestly backloaded and is backloaded, and they are now 2-4 in ACC play. This is, I think, definitely the best team Syracuse has played in the league so far. It was a home game, but they entered tonight, I believe it was 8.5-point underdogs, and they lost this game by more than that. It was 85-61, the final score, and it was never in doubt in the second half. So I see Pat is on the line. Pat, we're going to get to you. I think we'll wait until Red is at the podium, because I have my instincts are telling me Red will be at the podium in the very near future here. So I don't want to have to cut you off. I want to give you full reins once we do get to you. I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts after this one. If you want to call in after Pat, you can as well. 315-437-7644. Let's look a little bit more at the stat sheet and some takeaways from this game. And I touched on it earlier. It's frustrating that Elijah Moore didn't play more, no pun intended, in the second half. He played 1 minute in the second half, which I believe was virtually the last minute of the game, when Naheem McLeod came in for his minute and scored 2 points. It's maybe the first bucket McLeod has had in like a month or two. I don't know how long it's been. So in the end, Syracuse did play 10 players, another game where they were without Donnie Freeman. I don't think that's why they lost this game. It's unfortunate that we haven't seen this team totally healthy, but I will say Louisville has two of what we thought going into the year were going to be two of Louisville's best players. They are out for the season. And what have they done? Well, they're 6-1 in ACC play, and they're taking advantage of a down ACC, and they're well on their way to getting back to the NCAA tournament after it has been really, really, really bleak at Louisville the last couple of years. So on one hand, it's like you look at Louisville, and that could be a positive for Syracuse, that there's a program that you just never in a million years before the transfer portal would have been able to turn it around as quickly as Louisville has in one season. They brought in some dudes in the portal, and let's go to the podium right now because Red Autry is there after this one.
Got a three-pointer, and then we foul, three-point shooter, and I thought, from there on, they kind of, that momentum carried in, and we just couldn't get going. They did a great job on JJ, and if JJ scores 4 points and stuff like that, we're going to have a tough time to win. And we didn't get anything from some guys that we have been getting some from. Lucas didn't have a good game, and so again, that's hard to overcome. When they do a good job on JJ, and so we have to continually work on some things. We just didn't take care of the ball like we wanted to. Too many kind of unforced turnovers and too many deflections. So, we have to clean that up and continue to work and get ready for the next game. Any questions?
Brad, when JJ gets shut down like that, what's plan B?
Plan B, we were trying to get the ball inside a little bit. They did a good job. They pushed Eddie out and Jair out. They really do a good job of working. I don't think we worked hard enough to get it in there. Obviously, Eddie, Jair, and JJ, those guys are a big part of what we do. We just couldn't get the ball inside. Whether it was a deflection or, we just couldn't get them in the right position. Every time they got it, they may have been too far away from the basket, so they pushed us out. But typically, when JJ's not going, we try to go to those guys to kind of manufacture some points.
Coach, Adrian, when you look at Al Falcon, as well as JJ and Chris, the guys that return on this team with so many new faces, not just in this game, but overall, what do you see from the returners and leadership-wise, maybe what your takeaways are right now?
I think the guys that are all returned are in different roles. JJ now is the guy. I think, that's something that, you can't take lightly. It's, you got to shoulder it, good or bad. You got to be there and, we got to depend on you. And, you just got to keep playing through stuff when it's not going your way when you're the guy. I think Kyle has made strides, being tough, bringing in energy, making some shots, just doing all the things that we need. And, Chris Bell is, obviously, he played better today, but, none of that stuff really matters when you lose like this. But, again, for him, the ball went in, so hopefully we can continue to get him consistent. He's been a little bit inconsistent this year, so, that's what I have in those guys.
Coach, how disappointing is it to drop under 500 at this point of the year?
It's always, it's always disappointing to be under 500. You just got to keep fighting and battling each day. You got to get better. We have to get better. And it's been like that for the whole year, whether it was due to injuries, whether it was due to poor play, it all matters, this team. And so we just got to continue to get better. And obviously it's disappointing, but, the season's not over with yet. We still got a lot of games left, and that's how we're going to attack it,
Autry, you mentioned JJ had about time. Is this the kind of defensive attention you can expect from the senior rest of the season?
I would think so. So we have to do a better job of, getting them maybe below the foul line and sometimes on top of the foul line. We just got to do a better job of getting it to him. But obviously he's our go-to guys, and he's on the top of the scouting report. So teams are going to do different things. So we'll be prepared for that.
Was it the physicality of Louisville, both offensively and defensively, that caused you guys problems tonight?
No, I thought they get up and down, good defensive team, really good defensive team. I thought they pushed us out a little bit, but I thought we had some opportunities early that, we had a couple of open threes, we had a couple of drives that we just didn't finish. And again, those a couple of loose balls, when we didn't get it, they turned those into points. And I thought that was the difference. That started the separation.
So you mentioned those early opportunities falling away. At the half, nearly 5 minutes after you didn't score, what was the message to the team then?
Just got to keep working, trying to get better shots, and really, defending, trying to get some defensive stops. And then we got a couple, and then, we didn't cash in on the offensive end. But you just got to keep working. Again, this is a 40-minute game. We always talk about 4-minute games, 4-minute games, 4 minutes at a time. That's what we talk about. Even if we're winning, we play it with 4-minute games.
game by 24 points. What was tough about Cuse game, especially when you went on that stretch?
Obviously he's very good. He hadn't been really shooting it as well. He's been scoring. I thought today the difference was he made his shots. He made his threes, and we lost him a couple of times. Again, he's a guy that controls everything that they do. So, but he's a really good player. I thought he just, he gave us a lot of problems, but in the lane, when he was making his shots, I think the big difference was he made his shots today.
Coach, Elijah Moore's now got 6 games without scoring after he really broke out against Georgetown, Maryland. What's going on last weekend?
He had some open looks. They just didn't go in, and then, that's really it. I thought he had 2 or 3 open looks, and, they just didn't go in. I mean, again, he has to, stay with it. When he gets his opportunities, he has to keep shooting, and I think he passed up a couple, trying to put it on the floor. He has, he can shoot. He has to keep shooting. He has to stay confident.
Yeah, Louisville's obviously a very good team. You guys have struggled this year against really good teams. Like, how do you close that gap against these better teams?
I think, every team that we've played against, I think it's been times, it's little moments where, we don't do, whether it's a rebound, and they cash it in, and I think that momentum comes up. But we just have to, we have to keep trying to play through when we're down. Right? Like when we get down, we got to keep playing, and that's what we talked about, like we did against Boston College. We kind of kept fighting. Again, Louisville is a different team. Again, they came in here and they, it was fast paced, and again, it was little moments where I thought the game kind of got increased.
Coach, any update on Donnie's injury? When will be back?
No, I have no updates yet. Still just waiting.
Coach, it seemed I think their whole starting class would have done this.
Well, I think obviously their starting 5 played the bulk of the minutes. I thought offensively, again, Chucky, he got into the lane. I thought they, and Trent, they all shot the ball well when they had the rotations and they kicked it out. And again, like in the first half, we had some of those. We didn't make those shots, and I thought they made the shots.
Well, and for one more, was there any thought about pressing earlier in the game?
No, I mean, again, they are, when they have guys like Renee Smith that can shoot it, when you start pressing, that's how they get loose. And you try to find those guys. But, it's a very good team. They take care of the basketball. They have multiple ball handlers out there. So, again, even when we press at the end, it's going to be much of a result from that. It's a good team. When you got a bunch of ball handlers, it's hard to press sometimes.
Thanks, Coach.
Thank you.
Is Adrian Autry's full post-game press conference, always brought to you by RomanoCars.com. RomanoCars.com for our full Adrian Autry post-game press conference, which you can always catch here on QSportsTalk.com and ESPN Radio. We will take a quick timeout. We'll get to Pat in Syracuse, and your phone call could be after him as well. 315-437-7644. That's the phone number to call for ESPN 44. Orange fall tonight, 85-61 to Louisville. We're here on the Burdick postgame show on ESPN Radio, Syracuse, Utica, Rome, and QSportsTalk.com.
This is Orange Nation.
We can talk, guys, about how to turn this ship around for sure. I see some of you commenting that. I think you know where I'm probably going to go with that. It's a lot about the money, sadly. But, there's still some frustrating things in terms of, I don't know why a timeout wasn't called when there was a 12-0 run at the end of the half. I don't think it's going to change the outcome of this game. I think, for the most part, the coaching staff gets too much blame because the roster is what it is, and they don't really have the pieces compared to Louisville right now. And I see some of you like Louisville is just College of Charleston and Frank Anselm. That's not true. Like Chucky Hepburn is a very good player. They had the #1 transfer portal class in the country. Some of that is just the volume of recruits they brought in the portal. But Terrence Edwards was the best player in the Sun Belt. Everyone wanted him. Like, they added some dudes for sure, and a lot of experienced guys, a lot of guys that are on their 5th year or 4th year playing college basketball. But I get that we've talked a lot about Louisville and how they turned it around. We can focus a little bit more on Syracuse. Everyone that's saying, oh, we should go hire this guy, go hire Roy Williams, Nate Oates, like, we need a different coach. I don't. So, again, I see the comment, don't blame the SU coaches for the roster. That's literally their job. Yes, they did not do well, as I've said, with the resources they have, the NIL they have. But the biggest problem and the biggest reason why the roster isn't good is because Syracuse lacks resources in NIL, and it is all about that now. It used to be about money somewhat, and you could kind of get away with it because the prestige of the program mattered. Now it is literally who is paying you the most, and the dollar figures that Louisville has. Like, I really wish that we were at a point where everyone just put out the payroll they have like it's Major League Baseball or something, and we knew, okay, this Louisville roster is 10 mil and the Syracuse roster is 2 mil or whatever it is. I'm not saying that's what it is. It's probably not that big of a gap, but I mean, it's a big gap, and I know it comes across as, oh, we're just making that excuse, and it's not like I don't mean anything negative by it. It's just the reality of the situation is NIL is a huge part of what your roster is now and how much money you have. Yeah, Syracuse, it's pretty clear that they put a ton of the resources they have into football, which I think is smart because football you need to be good in right now. And they had a great year because of that. But, I mean, honestly, they haven't had a great year in the portal football to this point. And you see the prices. Duke just paid a QB $8 million over 2 years. And that's Duke football. So I think they're more competitive in football. But, I mean, we talk to Wild Hack on the Learfield radio broadcast every week, and I remember asking him once about NIL this year on air, and he said, we're more competitive, but we're still not where we need to be. So, it's each year, the NIL and the rosters are becoming more and more expensive, and it's a rat race to keep up with it. Yeah, Eddie, we paid a lot, but remember Devo just said the other day that SMU offered him 1.2, so it's almost surprising that we kept Eddie. And you could go on and on about, oh, Eddie isn't worth it. I don't think they used the resources they have great with this team, but there's a lot of pressure to make sure that you don't miss any when you're working with a limited pool. Chino Oriem, I don't think that's the answer, guys. I mean, great coach, but he's not getting any younger.
Is the Burdick Lexus and Burdick BMW postgame show.
All right, back here on the postgame show. Tim Leonard in with you tonight. Orange lose to Louisville. That was kind of expected going into the night that they might lose, but there was some optimism that maybe this team was turning a corner. 2-game win streak. Maybe they could keep this one competitive. They could cover. They could be in a game with a very good Louisville team that had won 6 in a row, now 7 in a row. And from the last 5 minutes of the first half on, it was pretty obvious that was not going to be the case tonight. So if you have thoughts after this one, feel free to call in at 315-437-7644. And let's go to the phone lines with our guy Pat in Syracuse. Pat, what were your thoughts after this one?
Yeah, so I was able to sit courtside, and one of the best things of the night was seeing Devo there doing his thing. The people courtside were pretty much, everybody was there hoping for a good game and knowing that that was unlikely. And then, there were second half wagers going on if they could cut it to 11. I mean, that's just the bar that's now been set. And, when you go back to the demise of this program, starts with Andre Jackson and Donovan Klingon. Okay, back when those things happened, Gary McNamara was 3 hours late to Andre Jackson's last meeting with the family. It's not an opinion; it's a fact. Okay, we were right in it for Andre Jackson. All right, we didn't get him. He went to Connecticut, and that just started some of the momentum. He's a phenomenal player. He won a ring. He made the NBA, and it only takes a couple players like him and Donovan Klingon and some of these guys that we finished second or third in, because we just didn't work hard enough on the recruiting trail. And people can say, that's back then, this is now. No, it's all relevant. It's all building your brand. Anybody who's in business knows about building your brand and marketing your brand and then representing a culture. We do none of that. I'll give you 2 points of our culture that are so bad. I'm going to call out J.J. Starling's dad. Okay, he's sitting right behind me, and he's screaming at the officials who had nothing to do with the game whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, is that really the reason they're losing games,
yeah,
Pat?
No, but what I'm saying is the culture is JJ's the most important player on this team. Okay, so it is relevant to know the mindset of the culture that surrounds this team. Here's another example, Tim. If you want to do them back and forth, I'm all game for it, because look at one of the plays in the game where 2 Syracuse players have incidental contact and fall in the corner. What does our head coach do? What was he doing right when that happened?
He threw his hands up, right?
He was barking at the officials instead of worrying about his team. Like, you have a battle with a culture of your team. Don't worry about the refs when you're getting your ass handed to you. Like, it's just so bad. And then when you look at the scoreboard and then you look at the 2 sidelines, you would think Louisville was down 25, not up 25, Tim. These are not opinions. These are pretty much facts. And I don't know if it's because of the airways you're on or what agenda you might have, but what I'm saying is...
I don't have any agenda. I don't know. I mean, I think I call it like it is. I've been on here and made comments about how I do think there are some errors with this coaching staff, and I didn't like in this particular...
What did you see on the sidelines? I mean, look at how connected Louisville is, up 25 on defense, versus Syracuse up down 25. Time after time. These little things. Coach talks the talk. He doesn't walk the walk, okay? Putting Carlos in to start the second half, it was one of many just head scratchers. And then go to his post-game press conference, Tim. Okay? How can you disagree that he sat there and said, because Bell happened to make 3 or 4 open corner threes, that Bell played a good game? Let me ask you, Tim, did you watch the game?
Yes, I watched the game, Pat.
Do you think Chris Bell played a good game?
Not really. No, I mean,
no, he didn't. He was bad on assignments, bad on rebounding, bad on defense. He just shot well. There's a difference between shooting well and playing well. There's so many things that coach says that are just so bad and so embarrassing that, like, I just think it's time to wash, rinse, and repeat. And, a lot of people courtside were saying, and I'll leave you on this, that everybody knows that next year they want to keep red because of the recruiting class. But I said it before, and I'm going to say it one more time. Okay, there's plenty of programs that have top 5 or top 10 recruits or classes that are not doing it. Okay, you have to. So let me ask you this, Tim. I'm going to leave you with a question.
Yeah.
What could energize this program more? Getting a new coach or next year coming in with the class that we have?
So,
with the potential of keeping some of those recruits and the potential of losing some of those recruits, because that's a reality. Because you can't tell me that Carmelo Anthony...
The new coach question, though, Pat, it's just not... They would have to be paying for 4 coaches. It's not going to happen. And
but the reality is it's not going to happen. So the reality is to analyze what you do have. That's all I'm doing. It's analyzing what we do have. That's all I'm doing is analyzing what he says, what he does. He talks about 4-minute segments and 4-minute increments. And all I could tell you is everybody in the arena knew that we were playing the scoreboard, because you could be down 25 and still play not the scoreboard, but play your team and play your guys and play each possession and easily cut that lead to 12 and at least show some semblance of a basketball team. And
but wouldn't you agree, Pat, that the number one issue right now is they don't have the personnel compared to Louisville?
I mean, talent-wise, Louisville has more talent, but I don't think it's. I don't think it's substantial. I mean, how many players on Louisville are playing in the NBA? Probably
that
zero.
I don't know. I mean,
probably zero.
But that doesn't mean
are playing in the NBA. I mean, there's
maybe one guy who was hurt. Yeah, Donnie Freeman someday.
I think if you switch coaches, that's a 6-point to 10-point game.
In a loss for, like, if Syracuse had Pat Kelsey, you think they still lose? Or yeah.
I think they lose by 8.
Yeah,
8 to 10.
I'm with you on that, and that's where I just feel like the coaching, and you're making some decent points. I think the idea of the negativity on Syracuse's bench and the positivity on Louisville's bench, to me, we're over-reading that a little bit just because, of course...
It's not just in this game and this score. It's every game.
Right,
Tim,
but they've had a terrible year. Of course the coaching staff's going to be negative on the bench. Like, I could see if they were positive, some people calling in and saying, why aren't they getting more on the players? Why isn't Red getting more on the refs in some of these situations? He should get a technical. He should fire up his team. So you can look at that and say that's a negative, that our bench doesn't look happy, but at the same time, what bench would look happy when they're losing by 20 and it's a very frustrating season to date going into the game?
Yeah, but then you don't say in the post-game press conference that you're playing 4-minute games, because that's just not the case.
Well, they didn't do a good job of it tonight, but that he's saying that's what they're striving to do. I guess what I'm saying is the only thing that I'll stand on is, one, they're definitely not going to fire Red, and your idea.
No, they're not.
Yeah,
they're not.
And you know that, and I know that, like, you get that, but some people out there actually are putting in the chat, go get Roy Williams, go get certain coaches. Like, it's just bonkers.
We do have resources. We do have resources. And I don't care about Syracuse's P&L. Like, I don't care if our P&L is in the red or not. I just want a relevant program. And that's all the fans want. And we have a large fan base. We have a large alumni base. We have a large tradition. We have a large arena. We have, and then you look there, I'm sitting courtside, and there's no one in the third tier. No one. Zero. It's embarrassing. There was more green shirts for the stupid giveaway than fans. I mean, that's just embarrassing. So, you know what? They made their bed. They can lie in it. Everybody knows Boeheim wanted Jerry, and we can piddle-paddle around it. I don't know what Jerry would have done. Because,
I don't know how much better it'd be going if Jerry was the head coach. It's an impossible question,
I don't know either.
I think it still goes back to Syracuse is playing with a pool that is smaller than Louisville and some of these SEC schools and some of the schools that are in the top 25. So, I don't know if many coaches would have been successful, quote-unquote successful, taking over for Boeheim and dealing with the resources they have and trying to put together a roster. And
Anybody who starts McLeod, Taylor, and Carlos, to me, is not equipped to be a top 25 coach. And we need a top 25 coach.
Well, he's not starting McLeod, right? What do you mean?
He did last year. Do you need me to send you the game tape? Because he did start McLeod last year.
Sure, but isn't that a roster issue? I mean,
no, it's his decision. It was his decision to start McLeod last year over Brown, which was dumb. And Taylor, dumb. Carlos, horrible. And he just continues to show that he's just not the guy. And we'll just leave it at that, Tim. You're doing a great job. Unfortunately, these calls are going to get less and less, so the chat will have to find somebody else to talk about.
Okay.
But all I can tell you is, Tim, keep it up.
Yeah,
thanks so much.
I appreciate it, Pat. And look, I can hear frustration in Pat's voice. I know a lot of you are frustrated. You can probably sense that I'm a little frustrated. I mean, it's the situation. I understand that it hasn't been perfect from Coach Autry. It hasn't been great from the coaching staff. You can nitpick things like they look too negative on the sideline and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, the biggest issue with this program right now is they didn't put together a very good roster, partially because they don't have competitive NIL with maybe to the degree that it needs to be. And if you don't have good NIL, you're just not really going to be feeling great about the roster you have going into the season. Could it have been better this year? Absolutely. And I think it's right to talk about other stuff and talk about how the coaches are doing. But at the end of the day, the biggest issue is still, what do you have from a roster standpoint? And right now, it's pretty clear Syracuse does not have a very good roster at least compared to other Syracuse teams. So that's just how I feel on it. I understand that a lot of you are frustrated, and I don't think it's worth just throwing out all the other factors, but unfortunately, that's the reality of the situation, is the roster is not great right now. Let's go to Jason, who is in Maryland, who is waiting patiently as Pat and I were chatting there. Jason, what's on your mind after this one?
Man, following Pat is rough.
Yeah, but, tough assignment there. You don't have to go 10 minutes. Please, you can keep it tighter.
I'll try to keep it limited. First off, Tim, I love your work, man. I'm in Maryland, so I saw you on Masson, and you did a great job
I
there.
appreciate it, man. Thanks for saying that.
No problem.
Go Lows.
Yeah, I hope they can actually win a playoff game for once.
Yeah, I know.
But getting into the orange, which is a lot more depressing, I would say this about Red. I was all in on year 3, and I know he's going to get year 3. My fundamental issue with him as a head coach that I've noticed since I've watched him, and I've been watching Syracuse basketball since the early 80s, mid-80s.
Yeah.
He just doesn't have a system. It's the same system. We run the same offense that we ran with Boeheim. We run a very poor man-to-man defense that lacks fundamentals in every way. They still don't know how to figure out how to get by screens. They always go under the screens. It's always with a shooter, leaves the shooter open. The guy makes 5 or 6 threes. It happens all game. It's very frustrating as a fan. When they do move on from Red, because he is not the right guy, they have got to find a guy with a system, an offensive system that he's going to install, in a style of play that you can look at and say, okay, this is how they play, this is their identity. Because, Tim, I've been watching this team for 2 years, and maybe longer, even with Boeheim. And with Boeheim, it was the 2-3 zone, but near the end, we didn't even do that well. And it was just ISO offense and bad defense, and it's just kind of gone from ISO offense to bad man-to-man defense, and they don't really have an identity, and not a positive identity. I think once we get through this next year, hopefully will be unless he turns it around in some miraculous way, I think that's the way you get through the NIL thing. You bring in a coach with a system who brings in players that fit it. We don't run a system. We go after athletes. That's the problem, and we're not getting good ones. We haven't had a legit point guard since Tyler Ennis. So, yeah, we've got a lot of issues with this program, but I think it starts with, I just don't think Red is the guy. And until, we get a guy in here that has a plan and knows how to execute that plan, I think we're going to be looking at games like tonight where, quite frankly, Tim, every game we've played against any team worth their salt, we have gotten run out the building.
Yeah. I mean, run out the building. I guess you're right. I mean, they have not played up to competition. The Maryland game, this game, yeah. No. Last year, there were a lot of games like this when they played against good teams. It was pretty obvious what the result was going to be by the, end of the first half and early stages of the second half. So, the hope was maybe they weren't going to lose as lopsided this year and stay more competitive because those got frustrating last year. I hear you a little bit on the idea of what's our system and things like that. I guess, when you watch Louisville, it's not like they're doing anything revolutionary on offense. I do think they have a very good coach in Pat Kelsey. I think he runs some good stuff out of timeouts and sideline plays and things like that. But I think Syracuse has been effective on those type of situations this year. So I think it's not like some of the best teams in the country are running some unbelievable stuff. It's Syracuse has always had, even when Boeheim was humming and they had some really good teams, they've always run an offensive style that is a little bit more personnel based and will give
pro level.
Pro level, give the guy space to operate and go get a bucket. And I think you see J.J. Starling is a guy that sort of thrives, not tonight, obviously, but he has thrived in that style of offense, and he has reins to go get a bucket down the stretch, and he's been very effective in those situations. Unfortunately, they don't really have a lot of guys that are able to go get a bucket. Like Lucas Taylor has started to do it some, and he does some nice things, but then he misses the shot. Or Kyle Cuff gets free for a shot, and he misses it. And so I get you a little bit. It's not like the offense is jumping off the page at you, and it's some sophisticated offense, and they're getting wide open looks all the time. But I don't know if his system is much different from the high levels of college basketball.
Well, obviously the personnel is important.
Yeah.
He certainly identified the wrong guys, in my opinion. But hindsight being 2020, I mean, you can't really do anything about that now. I wanted to ask you one more thing before I jump off here. What do you think of maybe replacing a couple of the assistant coaches? I'm thinking of Griffin and maybe the guy from Mount St. Mary's around my way next year with some maybe, or at least one of them, with an older coach to kind of, I don't know, maybe help with things, the defense or the offense or whatever. It doesn't really matter. Just somebody that is not from the tree of Syracuse.
Well, Engelstad's not from the tree, but I get what you're saying, I guess. Yeah.
A little higher level guy than him, though. You know what I mean?
Well, my thing with nitpicking the assistant coaches, it's kind of hard for me to have a take, honestly. I mean, I go to some of the practices and I see these assistants, and I can glean that they're all working hard, and it seems like they all have a good understanding of the system, I guess, if we want to go back to that. But, you know, like with Engelstad, for example, what have we seen that makes us think he's not the guy? You know, it's just hard to really have an opinion on an assistant coach, because I think those are the type of things you look at when everything is falling apart and it's been a tough season like this. I mean, let's go back to when Engelstad was hired. He was the Mount St. Mary's head coach. I think everyone was like, nice, good hire. That's great. We got a head coach at the Division I level to come be one of our top assistants. And he's working with the bigs. Like, the bigs have been fine, I guess. Majstorovic has grown under him. It's hard for me to really blame the assistants. And maybe they are not the right assistants, and maybe there is some truth to... Because there are times when I watch the games and I feel like Red should be quicker to call a timeout or quicker to go back to this guy, or maybe take a guy out because of foul trouble. And those are little things that you can kind of understand, because he just hasn't been a head coach, and it's only whatever his 40th game or something like that in this role. So maybe like an experienced head coach would help him out with that. I mean, I think back to the end of the first half tonight, I thought it was kind of crazy that they didn't call a timeout or they didn't call a timeout at all when they went on the 12-0 run at the end of the first half. So I hear that stuff, but I don't really think there's a leg to stand on to get up here and be like, Engelstad isn't the guy, or Griff isn't. I mean, you could also point to the recruiting class is great, and a lot of your recruiting class is your assistants. And I think Griff seems to be a good recruiter. So if we're saying the recruiting has gone up, but the coaching on the floor hasn't, maybe that's also a testament to the assistants and what they're doing on the recruiting trail. So I struggle with that one a little bit, but I hear you, like maybe an experienced assistant could provide some value. I just don't know if it would change things too dramatically.
I mean, in the sense of like, Red just doesn't seem to have a feel for the game as far as, okay, they're on a run, we need to stop this now, and he lets it go a minute or two too long, and it's like 8-10 extra points. And like, maybe if you've got a vet guy there that's been through because St. John's did this with Chris Mullen and Gene Cady. Like he was there for a couple of years just to help him. I think it was Mullen.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think Michigan was an example. It didn't really work, but Juwan Howard had Martelli on the staff as kind of a vet guy that's been around. I'm sure there's other examples that I'm forgetting right now. So, I mean, your staff matters a lot. I think it's underrated, if anything. It's just hard for me to say this guy isn't good because, like, as an assistant, because I don't know. I mean, maybe this is showing that they miss Jerry McNamara a little bit because last year's team looked a little bit better at times, but I think that's also just personnel-based, too, when you get into comparing last year to this year.
I guess I'm just grasping at straws trying to figure out what he can do, because if you just keep doing the same thing over and over again, you're going to get the same results. So I'm thinking, if he gets another year, he's got to try something different because if he just runs it back with the same crew and doesn't do well in with the transfers, it's just going to be the same thing next year.
Yeah,
in my opinion, I think something has to change. Otherwise, there will be a change after next year. So, Tim, I appreciate you taking my call, brother.
You almost made it to the length of Pat's phone call, by the way, Jason. That was good stuff.
I didn't intend to, man.
No, you're good.
About that.
No, of course. I appreciate it.
Keep up the great work, man. I appreciate you.
Appreciate you listening and everything. That's Jason in Maryland. All right, we have to take a break. We're overdue for a timeout. One last break on the Burdick Postgame Show. I'm willing to hash out all the little details and why this team is struggling. Again, I go back to the thing that probably is going to cause all of you to scream in the chat at me and say, oh, yeah, we're going back to the NIL point and the personnel. That is the number one issue right now. And we'll see what they do in the offseason. Maybe you make an adjustment to the coaching staff. I don't really think that's necessary. I don't think that that's going to actually provide much of a change. Could be wrong on that. I hear the standpoint of you got to change something, but right now the biggest issue is Syracuse does not have the personnel that they used to have, and that is partially on the coaching and scouting, and that's why you have a general manager to make sure that you get the right guys into the program that fit the right roles, and it's unfortunate, but this roster just has not worked this year. So that's the biggest issue right now. We can take more of your phone calls, 315-437-7644. We're back after this on ESPN Radio and CuseSportsTalk.com.
This is Orange.
It must have been that guy. He called someone called 3 times and they gave up because it was ringing, but you didn't notice.
The only person that called that didn't get on the air.
Oh, I never went to Penny. I don't know. It was like when we had Pat on the line.
Yeah, that was some guy who was
Okay. All right. It wasn't like when Pat was on, but like it started at the end of the presser and then I don't know, whenever I texted you a couple times, I just want to make sure you saw it. Yeah, maybe. It's very possible. There was someone who was just on. I'm assuming you're talking about him, like that it went to pending and then it dropped. Yeah. Right. You're good. I'm sure you're on it. Yeah. You're good. All right, chat. Let me catch up here. Mike Hopkins coming back. I think that ship has sailed. See ya. Football equals dart. Basketball equals fart. That made me laugh. Same old shit here, Tim. I appreciate you guys listening. Find my voice a little bit. Hopefully it's not too bad to listen to. How about Carlos starting the second half, Pat? I thought you'd get a kick out of that. I was pretty surprised by that move. Then he scored some points right out of the break. Yeah, we got the Labatt blue light at least. Oh, I hope Burton doesn't score 40. Women play Louisville on the road Thursday, Zach, and it's going to be a tough game. The Louisville women are also on a 6-game winning streak. The men are now 7, but yeah, that's the difference, CBW. The women's conference is very good. It's tough to find wins for them. Red reads the chat. I don't think he does. That'd be something. Yeah, they miss a lot of layups, Ryan. It's tough. Some easy layups, too. Bad turnovers also.
This is the Burdick Lexus and Burdick BMW postgame show.
All right, final segment on the postgame show. Welcome back in. Still take your phone call if you'd like. If you want to vent frustration, get out those last couple thoughts for the evening before you wind down. Just let it all out here on the Burdick postgame show. 315-437-7644. That is the phone number to call for ESPN 44. You can dial that up. You can join in on the conversation on QSportsTalk.com as well. The Orange will have Notre Dame on Saturday, 4 p.m. tip. We'll have pregame and postgame for that one as always. I believe that will be Brian for you on Saturday for the pregame and the postgame. Normal slate of shows tomorrow to vent out frustration. I'm sure Paulie will love to take your calls tomorrow on the state of the program and everything that's gone wrong and why you need to fire Red and yada, yada, yada. So that is the state of things right now. It was another frustrating one for Syracuse, losing by a final of 85-61. And no Donnie Freeman again tonight. What is Pat saying? Mario's dropping news, or let's see. Did our guy Mario Sacco say something about Donnie Freeman? Let me pull up the old Twitter. Donnie missed his 3rd game in a row here tonight. He was seen in a walking boot. I don't see anything on Mario's Twitter, so we'll just roll along. I don't know what the deal is with Donnie, when he'll be back. He hopefully will be back soon. I think the tweet they put out was he is progressing. He is day-to-day. They've maintained that day-to-day is the status of things from basically the outset. So we'll see. Hopefully it's not a situation like J.J. Starling. I know that Donnie isn't the greatest defender in the world, but he gives you so much from a length standpoint, from a talent on the offensive end, from the ability to get your own bucket, that it obviously would be great to have the top 10 ranked freshman back and available for Syracuse. As I brought up earlier, though, a lot of teams deal with injuries. Louisville dealt with injuries, and they're dealing with it very well. Louisville also went into the portal and totally reconfigured their team and brought in a ton of experienced guys. I think there's something to be said for that. Syracuse also brought in some good experience this year in the portal, and they are also bringing in some talented freshmen next year. It's an interesting position that coaches are in right now. We've seen some coaches really lean into, we're just going to go get guys in high school because teams are not after high school recruiting quite as much, and we're not going to focus on the portal as much and see how that goes. I think if I'm willing to bet, I feel like Syracuse is always going to try to recruit through the high school ranks, partially because it costs a lot to get a guy out of the portal who is 1 year of eligibility remaining and has already proven it for 4 years, 3 years somewhere else. And that is a lot of the guys that Louisville added. They didn't just add some scrubs in the portal, and it's not like, I know they were preseason 9th in the ACC, but they added some dudes. And I think they were preseason 9th because no one could understand how they could get so much better so quickly after how bleak it got in the Kenny Payne era. And that's the optimistic thing from a Syracuse standpoint, is if you hit on some guys in the portal, you can turn this thing around. Look at what football did this year. They brought in some great portal additions. Not every year, Kyle McCord, the Ohio State quarterback, is going to hit the portal, who started all year and have a relationship with their coaching staff. They got lucky in some of those regards. Fadil Diggs had a relationship with Elijah Robinson. He was a huge add in the portal. They're maybe having a little bit of a tougher time adding in the portal this year, football. But it really comes down to money, guys. And we don't know the finances of Syracuse, and we don't know the finances of Louisville, but we can kind of tell based on what Louisville added in the portal that they are dealing with some pretty good resources there. And we can kind of tell based on what Louisville has done in the football portal as well, that they have some good resources there. Quarterback position in football, year over year, they have brought in a proven starter, and that is not cheap. So, unfortunately, I do go back to that. The NIL situation is a big part of it right now, and it's a really big offseason for this coaching staff, for this program, to try to add the right pieces in the portal. We know they're going to have to add a center in the portal. Eddie Lampkin, I'm sure they gave him a good chunk of the NIL budget this year, and Lampkin did have another double-double tonight, but it does feel at times like it's kind of empty-calorie double-doubles. And the thing that frustrates you about Lampkin, and it's not really anything that Eddie is doing in particular, we knew this going into the season, but he is a below-the-rim player, and because of that, they don't have much of a shot-blocking threat in the post position. It would really behoove them, I think, to address that and make sure that they are more well-rounded defensively in terms of what they have on the interior going into next year. Lampkin blocked a shot tonight, and I don't know how many he has this year, but it's probably what we can count on one or two hands, and he had 5 total blocks last year. And then you lost Donnie Freeman due to injury, who in theory should be a pretty good shot blocker. He hasn't picked up really any blocks this year either. So it's very rare that Syracuse has a player that has multiple blocks in a game. And when you don't have rim protection, it's really tough to be a solid defensive team. So that is an obvious flaw with the roster they constructed this year. Maybe they thought they would get more out of Naheem McLeod, who definitely could provide rim protection. And we thought going into the season, McLeod could be a guy that you could throw out there in zone, and maybe we would see some zone from the Orange. We would see some man-to-man, some different wrinkles. I liked the idea of let's go to pressure defense. That was an adjustment we saw coming out of the Christmas break, and they used it against Bucknell pretty effectively. Then they tried to use it in the next game against Wake Forest, and it was very ineffective. And they haven't really gone back to the press since. Red was asked post-game about that, and he sort of shook his head and said something to the effect of, that's not a defense we're going to use against Louisville. So, I don't know. You don't see a lot of teams press these days. It's become less common, just to my naked eye. It is something that I think, in theory, would help this team. I just don't know how effective their pressure defense is right now. And if they dedicate a lot of time to pressure defense, would it get better? Yes, but would it be to the point where you would be counting on it to be a big part of your scheme? We go back to what are the stats they've struggled in this year. For once, it's not rebounding. It's actually more just the turnover battle has been an issue. They've turned it over a lot against good teams. Didn't do it too much at the start of the year. Haven't really done it too much lately, so that's a good sign. But they had that 5 or 6 game stretch where turnovers were a big issue, and the specific turnovers of kind of the mental mistake variety were a big issue. And they don't generate turnovers. This is going to be one of the worst teams in Syracuse history in generating steals, generating turnovers, getting transition points. So it's frustrating because everything that we thought might be in the DNA of a good team in the Adrian Autry era, or the things that Coach Autry really was talking about in the preseason. We're going to get up and down. We're going to space the floor. We're going to have shooters everywhere, play some 5 out. We're going to make a lot of threes. We're going to take a lot of threes. Well, we're at about the midway point of the season, and they're not a good three-point shooting team. They started 5 for 10 from 3 tonight, and it felt like we were, watching something crazy. Then they finished 8 for 25 from 3. So the three-point shooting is not going to suddenly get better. They haven't been able to get up tempo like you would have hoped from this Syracuse team. And I don't know, maybe you try and work on that pressure defense a little bit more. I'm just sort of spitballing in terms of what are your options, what are different wrinkles that you can throw out there. It feels like the coaching staff spends a ton of time working on defense at practice, more time than an average coaching staff or an average team spends on practice or in practice on defense. And for the most part, defense has improved. It really hasn't been the central issue. Louisville scoring 81 tonight. I get some of it was when the game was out of hand, but it was really more an offensive issue and has been for the last couple games here. Again, though, for anyone that is out there and saying they got to fire Red, they got to move on, give Jay Wright a call, all this stuff is just crazy to me. They're not firing Coach Autry. And I have said consistently throughout the season, the biggest issue right now and the biggest thing to address is upping the NIL resources and upping the money that is available to spend on your roster so that you are competitive and you are able to bring in a solid roster. And you have more wiggle room in terms of you can miss on a guy in the portal, and if you hit on most of your guys, then you'll have a pretty good team. You look at Louisville, they didn't hit on everyone. They spent a lot of money on Frank Anselm, apparently, and he hasn't really been a hit. But it's fine because they brought in a lot of guys because they had a lot of money. And if you want to fire Red, think about the money that cost, and think about the idea of paying 4 coaches at once. We're talking 2 football coaches under contract and 2 basketball coaches under contract. And think about the coach that you would get and what they would be inheriting in terms of the resources. If resources is the biggest issue, and that's what I believe, I don't think firing the coach when he's still got probably a good chunk of his contract remaining and there's a buyout there and there's going to be the idea that you're paying 2 coaches for a little bit is the answer. So that's not going to happen. It's always been crazy talk, honestly, to think of Red getting fired this year or even before the end of next year. It just seems crazy to me. And there is a solid recruiting class coming in. So let's focus on how this situation can get better with Coach Autry. And there are things that the coaching staff can clean up. And I'm sure the coaching staff is watching back the film right now, and they're very upset, just like a lot of you are. But that's the reality of the situation. You need good resources, and resources have become pretty much everything in college athletics right now. And it's not a coincidence that some of these SEC schools are really succeeding because they're bringing in more in their TV contract, and they're bringing in good football money, and they have a good NIL base that started because of football probably, and they're ahead of the pack in that regard, and it's translating to basketball. You go back to the pre-NIL era, and the SEC was a football conference, and the ACC was a basketball conference. Just listen to some of these coaches that are out there and how they're talking about the league. I mean, I heard Coach K today on a podcast say, we might need the ACC to get back together with the Big East or just the ACC and Big East to form together and make a super conference in basketball, because it's pretty obvious that there's a reason why the ACC and the Big East are sliding right now. Outside of UConn, there's not a lot of schools that aren't really good in football or known for being basketball-heavy schools, and they're still staying up there competitively in basketball. Villanova is not doing great. I mean, Georgetown, we know the story there. They've actually had a nice turnaround in the Big East this year, and that's looking like a better and better loss from a Syracuse standpoint. They've got some good players, but they've dipped into NIL by reports a little bit more recently. So we'll leave you with that. I don't know. I don't know if I have much more to say. It's tough. It's frustrating times in college sports. I wish it wasn't as simple as that being the biggest reason, but that's how I feel about it. And I'm sure a lot of you will have thoughts the rest of the week, and we will have shows the rest of the week to continue to hash this out with you and try and make sense of where the Orange go from here. And they will be playing on Saturday against Notre Dame. I can tell you that. And that'll be another game that will happen. And I'm sure we will have pregame and postgame and a lot of things to discuss after that game. And heck, I bet they win that game on Saturday if I was willing to bet. That's an opportunity to avenge a loss on the road to Notre Dame. They have their star back in Burden. Syracuse has their star back in J.J. Starling, who had an off game tonight, and they're not going to win many games when Starling is not putting up the production like he was tonight. He struggled from the outset. So that is the postgame show. Thanks for hanging with us on QSportsTalk.com. And thanks for listening on the radio airwaves as well. We'll be back tomorrow with Orange Nation, 12 to 2. Paulie and Steve, Cody Mack, the sports show at 3 p.m. Brian Higgins in the 315 from 4 to 6 tomorrow. And we will talk to you then on QSportsTalk.com and ESPN Radio.
Evan, Canty, and Michelle